All right, well, here we are. It is the Real Punk and me, John McCarthy, to talk about some history in MMA. The UFC 64, had a main event fight with the champion, Rich Franklin, taking on the newcomer, a guy who only had one fight in the UFC at this time, a guy by the name of Anderson the Spider Silva. What do you remember about that fight there, Josh?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I remember before that fight.
Okay.
What I remember before that fight was he was a guy that came over from Pride, and he had lost a fight by a leg scissor knee bar, but he was dominating that
flying leg scissor.
Yeah. So he loses that fight, but he was dominating that fight up until that moment as well.
That was against Rio Chonin.
Yes. And then, he comes over, he had fought, I believe, in the Rumble on the Rock, and he had done well. Then something had happened where he didn't end up fighting in the finals. Did he miss weight?
Got disqualified. That's
right.
Fighting Yushin Okami.
Yes. So they had Jake Shields in that tournament. Who else did they have? Frank
Carlos
Trigg,
Condit, Frank Trigg.
It was a great tournament by Rumble on the Rock, by the way.
Really?
Fantastic.
Really good.
Anyways, Anderson Silva comes, and I was at this fight. It was at the what was the place called? It was when they were at the
Hard
small
Rock.
venue. It was at the Hard Rock. Was it called the Joint?
Yep, the
Was
Joint.
it called
at
the Joint?
Hard Rock.
Yeah, it was at the Joint, and he had fought Chris Lieben, his first fight. And
yes, sir.
I had seen Anderson Silva fight before. I was like, yeah, he's talented, he's good. I was like, but Chris Lieben's going to be able to pressure him. I was like, Chris Lieben's going to be able to get in on side on him, like get a takedown. He's not good off of his back. He made me fucking look like an idiot. Like within 30 seconds, I realized that I didn't know enough about Anderson Silva at the time. And I was kind of doing the whole, Chris has been in dog fights. He can take a shot. He's got good chin. The accuracy of Anderson Silva.
Was it 30 seconds that it took you to figure that out? Because I think the fight was over in 49 seconds.
No, it was I don't know if it was 30 seconds. It was, I'm going to just say the first combination.
Yeah.
I realized the reach, the way that Chris was fighting him, he was rushing, all the things that you tell a fighter, a young fighter, not to do, Chris Lieben was doing them. He was doing everything possible and just making mistake after mistake. And it was over quick. And Anderson Silva went on to fight Rich Franklin after that. And then even after the Chris Lieben, I still said, Rich is a different animal. Rich can take him down. Rich is southpaw. Rich is going to give him some problems. You know, Rich's style of stand-up, he has that like loopy right hook with the straight left. Like he was just dominating kind of people at the time.
Deceptive ground game.
Yeah, deceptive ground game. Like he's good. He's good, well built, took care of himself, still does to this day. He is a phenomenal fighter. Anderson went out there, and I didn't realize, because I had never seen Rich Franklin defend a clinch. And it was so eye-opening to me that a guy of Rich Franklin's level had no concept of how to defend a clinch. And then what was crazy, John, is that shortly after, I'd say probably a couple months after that, maybe like 6 months after that fight, I went to go start helping to coach Kung Lee. And he had the same type, who has got countless kickboxing matches, Sancho style. He had no idea how to defend a clinch either. That's the exact same way that Rich Franklin was defending the clinch. That's how Kung Lee would defend a clinch. I was like, what are you doing? And yeah, if you go back and you look at his fight with Wanderlei Silva, that's how he defended the clinch. He just put his arm there, thinking that was going to be enough to stop it. And that moment in that, I realized that not only is there levels to the game, there's levels to every art form. There's not just levels of, I'm a mixed martial artist, I'm good at this, and this. No. There's levels to kickboxing. There's levels to the boxing. There's levels to the wrestling. There's levels to the grappling. And there's different styles of every martial art that you can learn. There's different styles, and there's levels to that. You look at guys like Lyoto Machida. He is a fantastic karate style. Stephen Thompson, movement, MVP, movement, speed, all of those things. There's levels to that style of what they do. Alfie Davis, really good fights in Bellator. Good Taekwondo style, like kickboxer, elusive fighter. MVP, another level. Raymond Daniels, another level. Like they're right there with each other. But there's levels to that one style of martial art. And it goes across the board. And Anderson Silva showed the world that night against Rich Franklin. There's levels to the clinch game. There's levels to how you utilize your elbows, your knees, all of those things, how you lock your clinch on, how you control the position, how you turn them, how you press them to the fence, all of those things. Anderson Silva brought a new style to the game that people just in that weight class and across the UFC, across MMA, just were not prepared to see. They were thinking, Rich is going to do this. Rich is going to do that. I was one of them, and I was wrong. Anderson Silva brought the game, and he just was someone that was evolving the game. In every fight, he got better, craftier, new stuff. He helped change the game.
I can tell you, going back, let's go to the Chris Lieben fight real quick, because I was the referee for that fight, and it was absolutely crystal clear. Brawler versus technician coming into it. The brawler is going to come after him, so the technician has got to be on his toes, movement, accuracy, but also accuracy with power and a speed that Chris Lieben was not prepared to deal with at the time. I let that fight go on because Chris is known to be so tough and was a tough guy. And I let him get, beat up. Let's just be honest to make it clear that, hey, I gave him every chance I could. Well, then going into this fight, again, one fight in the UFC, and he got a title fight against Rich Franklin, who Rich had been on a nice little run. And Rich, I can tell you going into this, because, back when we talked to the fighters in the back, one of the things that Rich really talked to me about was he wanted to be in the clinch with Anderson. He felt like he was going to be much stronger. He looked at Anderson as being slightly built. I want to be in the clinch with him. Are you going to allow us to work in the clinch? I said, I'll allow you to work in the clinch. No problem. He goes, that's where I'm going to be working, doing a lot of my work. No problem. And that was the downfall of Rich Franklin in this fight. It was very clear that Rich had one way that he knew of breaking a Muay Thai plum. And when he locked up with Anderson, and Anderson grabbed a hold of that Muay Thai plum, and Rich went to use his one way of getting out of that Muay Thai plum, and it did nothing. And Anderson was locked on him. And you could see that look like, oh my God. And he tried it again, and nothing. He could not get him. And so at that point, he got hit with a knee, Josh, that, when you're inside, you hear things that nobody else hears.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, it knocked all the air out of Rich. You could hear it going out of him, it just goes. And I was like, oh, you're in trouble. Right. And I'm just watching him. I really wasn't watching Anderson. And Anderson is hitting him with several knees and then opening up with elbows. And the sound that was coming out of Rich Franklin was, that's all I kept hearing as he was trying. And I would tell you that he did not get a breath of air. It was like me falling out of that oak tree, as you would say. I didn't get a breath of air for a minute. Well, I'll tell you what, during the fight, Franklin did not get a breath of air for at least 40 seconds. Wow. 40 seconds he was fighting while going, that's the only sound he was making, trying to get air. And it would stop completely. And then all of a sudden he would try to get, and I was like, oh my God, just go down. Let me get you out of here. And he kept fighting. He was fighting, man. And I looked at him and thought, dude, you're a stud, because everyone else is just going to crumple. And he ended up ducking his head out of there to, get himself out of that plum, which is not the way we want to do it.
No.
It's going to lead you into a dangerous situation. And that's basically how the fight ended. Was he got back in the plum again. He had no way of getting out. He dipped his head, and this time Anderson was waiting for him to do it, knowing this is the only way you're going to get out. He brings the knee up. It took Rich's nose and pushed it across his face. Yeah. And I stopped the fight, and Anderson Silva was the new middleweight champion in the UFC. But if you understood what Rich Franklin was going through for most of that fight, you have to have nothing but respect for a guy that could have quit and could not breathe, but stayed fighting while he could not breathe, and was in a position against a guy that he had no concept He had no backup to go to get himself out of that Muay Thai plum. And it was a position that he honestly believed was going to be a strong position for him before that fight ever happened. And so, changing of the guard, it was a demolition. And a lot of people truly believed that Rich Franklin was going to be the person who was going to decimate Anderson Silva. It definitely didn't happen that way. And again, I had nothing but respect for Rich Franklin throughout that fight because, man, if you could hear him in that cage like I could, you would have gone, dude, just go down. Let me get you out of here. And he never did until that final blow from the knee.
What goes through your mind when you're in the back and you're doing the interview, or you're, giving them the rules, talking to them? Is there any last questions? Like that. I've done this with you countless times. And it just comes in and the guy goes, yeah, let me work in the clinch. And then you see what's going through your mind in that cage at that moment when he's asking you, this is where I want to work, and everything that he's was asking for is going wrong.
Yeah.
Where's your mindset?
It really depends on the situation. In that one, I didn't think anything bad about it at the time that he said it. I was like, all right, he wants to work with him. He believes that he has the ability to be stronger. That one, there's times when guys will say stuff and you go, are you joking? He's really, that's what you're thinking is like, that's a horrible idea. You don't want to do this, but you can't say it, but you're thinking it as you're in there. Hey, I'll let you work there. And then you walk out going, oh my God, this is going to go horribly for him. But in that situation, I thought, okay, he's going to work there. And as soon as I saw him try to use his way of pushing that arm his way is to take his arm and push it up through Anderson's arm. Yeah. And he went to do that and nothing. And then he tried it again and nothing. And then he ate the knee. And from that point, I was like, oh, this is definitely not going your way. And at the point that he got hit with the knee, I said, this fight's over. I knew it was over. And that was probably, I don't want to say, about 40 seconds into the fight, maybe 45.
Wow.
And the fight lasted about 3 minutes because he went another, like I said, about 40 to 45 without breathing. Finally was able to suck in air, and you could hear it when he finally got that breath of air, and he just took shot after shot, and he had no answers. He was so far behind in the fight. It was just one of those, as the referee, I knew, just let me get you out of here. Let me get you out of here without you being hurt. And eventually it got to the point he took the knee and his nose ended up, being, like I said, broken and put across his face. And so, yeah, he took damage, but, it is what it is. But it's one of those where you don't know what you don't know until you know. And that's exactly what happened.
This Rich Franklin Anderson Silva fight was definitely a changing of the guard, but it really was just the beginning of a new era of the Anderson Silva era, and it was something to really admire as his era built up and his legacy started to build, and Anderson Silva really started to change the game.